If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in a leather chair in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown Chicago, sipping an overpriced latte, I would have laughed until I choked on my instant ramen. Back then, I was just your average underpaid, overworked office drone. My life was a blur of spreadsheets, lukewarm coffee, and the occasional existential crisis. So how the hell did I get here? Well, it started with a typo. I was working a temp job at a mid-sized insurance company called Holbrook and Willis. You know, the kind of place where dreams go to quietly die under fluorescent lights. My official title was Data Entry Specialist, but really, I was just another cog in the machine. I entered numbers into little boxes, made sure columns lined up, and tried not to fall asleep at my desk. One rainy Tuesday morning, I got an email meant for someone else. The subject line read, "Urgent. Q2 Offshore Investment Summary, strictly confidential." Now, I should have just deleted it. That's what any reasonable employee would do. But curiosity has always been my downfall. I opened it. Inside were rows of figures, names I didn't recognize, and something called Project Whisper. There was mention of offshore holdings, Shellcore, and a transaction worth $8.3 million scheduled for the following Monday. The whole thing screamed shady. I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart thudded like a bass drum. Should I report it? Pretend I never saw it? Forward it back to whoever sent it with a polite, "Oops, wrong guy." I did none of those things. Instead, I downloaded the attachment. I wasn't planning to do anything with it. Honestly, I just wanted to read it again later. Maybe show my roommate Max so we could make fun of the corporate elite over some cheap beer. But that night, Max, who'd been mining crypto in our living room for years, took one look at the file and whistled. "Dude," he said, "this is money laundering, and you've got the keys." I laughed. "Keys to what, prison?" "No, man, look. This isn't just a report. There are account numbers in here, routing info. Someone's seriously screwed up." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was planning a heist, but because my brain was spiraling. What if I reported it and got fired? What if I didn't report it and they found out? What if the email was some kind of internal trap to test employee loyalty? But the next day, nothing happened. No follow-up email. No IT guy confiscating my laptop. Just another soul-sucking day at my desk. That's when the idea hit me. Not a plan, an idea. What if I sent a test? Just a tiny one. A $20 transaction from one of the dummy accounts listed in the file to a PayPal address I'd made years ago to sell used textbooks. I'm not proud of what I did, but I did it, and the money showed up instantly. That was the moment everything changed. I stared at the PayPal notification for a full 5 minutes, convinced it had to be a glitch. $20 USD from an untraceable corporate shell in the Cayman Islands, now sitting in my dusty old account that hadn't seen activity since college. I refreshed the page. Still there. You know that feeling when you find a crumpled $20 bill in an old coat pocket? Multiply that by 1,000 and add a layer of sheer panic. That's what it felt like. I knew I should be terrified. I knew it was probably illegal. But in that moment, all I felt was power. Max, of course, wanted to push it further. "We have to know if it scales," he said, pacing like a mad scientist. "Try 100 or 500. You're not pulling it from a real person. It's all numbers and fake companies." He wasn't wrong. The document listed 27 corporate entities tied to obscure addresses in Cyprus, the British Virgin Islands, and one that simply said Singapore Holdings, Umbrella. The transactions were all automated, recurring, precise, and untouched by human eyes. They were laundering millions, and I had accidentally found the tunnel between the walls. But I hesitated. This wasn't monopoly money anymore. It was real, traceable, dangerous. Still, I tried a second transaction. $250, just enough to be a mistake if someone checked. It cleared within 2 minutes, no alarms, no angry emails, no FBI vans pulling up to the apartment. Just Max and me sitting in stunned silence, watching the balance tick upward. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I woke up to find Max had created a spreadsheet titled Shadow Streams. He had categorized every company, every account, and had begun mapping out what he called the safe zones, accounts that were obviously fake, unmonitored, or hadn't seen withdrawals in over 12 months. He was treating it like a startup. "Dude," I groaned, wiping sleep from my eyes. "This isn't a business, it's a federal crime." "Not if they don't even know they're missing it," he grinned. I hated how logical that sounded, but we agreed on some rules. No large withdrawals, never from the same account twice, never anything that couldn't be explained away as a rounding error. Think small, think quiet, think invisible. For the next 2 weeks, we ran test after test, pulling between $50 and $500 per transaction. Each time, the money went through without a hitch. We used dummy emails, burner wallets, and routed funds through so many layers that even we had trouble keeping track. It wasn't glamorous. It was slow, methodical, almost boring, but the numbers added up. By the end of the month, my PayPal balance was $11,300. By the end of the second month, it was $42,600. It didn't feel real until I paid off my student loans in a single click. No begging, no waiting, no 25-year repayment plan. That's when Max looked at me and said, "We're not stealing, we're rebalancing the universe." It was a good line. I repeated it to myself every night like a prayer. Once we crossed the $50,000 mark, the fear began to fade. The first few weeks had been a blur of guilt and paranoia. Every siren outside made my heart jump. Every call from an unknown number sent chills down my spine. But then, nothing happened. Not a single email. Not even a glitch in the matrix. And that's when the spending started. Nothing outrageous, not at first. I upgraded my laptop, finally bought noise-canceling headphones, and splurged on real groceries. No more off-brand cereal or powdered mac and cheese. I felt like a king shopping at Whole Foods. Max went further. He ordered a curved ultra-wide monitor, a full mining rig upgrade, and started using the phrase tax optimization in everyday conversation. I told him he was getting cocky. He told me I was getting boring. It wasn't long before we made our first real mistake. We got greedy. There was a company listed in the document called Tidewell Ventures, with what appeared to be over $90 million in float, just sitting there. The metadata showed it hadn't been touched in 18 months. Max was obsessed. He spent 2 days analyzing the flow patterns, convinced it was what he called a ghost vault, basically a forgotten laundering node. He wanted to pull $5,000 from it. I said no. He pulled $10,000. It cleared instantly. But 24 hours later, we got a ping on the dummy account we'd used for the transaction. Just one message. "Nice try." We stared at the screen, mouths dry. No sender, no return address, just those 2 words. We shut everything down, wiped hard drives, threw out routers. Max even poured bleach on his old crypto laptop and smashed it with a hammer. Way too dramatic, if you ask me. I didn't sleep for 2 nights straight. I was sure someone would knock on our door any second. But again, nothing happened. No cops, no emails, no follow-up. And that's when something strange happened inside me. Instead of fear, I felt something else creeping in. Certainty. The idea that we weren't dealing with a government or law enforcement or any kind of official body. Whoever sent that message wasn't interested in punishment, just a warning, a boundary, a line not to cross. And so we didn't. For the next few months, we stayed quiet, pulled only from the lowest volume accounts, never more than $300 at a time, kept everything under the radar. Meanwhile, the money piled up. By June, my balance sat at just under $170,000. I'd never seen that many digits in one place, at least not attached to my name. Max was slightly ahead of me, though I suspected he wasn't telling me the full amount. We were still best friends, but there was an edge to our partnership now, like we were both playing chess with the same hand. One night, Max came back from a date wearing a Rolex. "You're insane," I said. "She thinks I'm in real estate," he said with a shrug. "You wear that thing outside. and someone's going to ask questions. They won't. People don't question confidence. He wasn't wrong, but I hated how right he was. It was around then I realized we weren't just doing something illegal. We were becoming different people, and that scared me more than prison ever could. I tried to live modestly. I really did. Even with 6 figures quietly accumulating in my accounts, I still rode the bus, still lived in the same peeling paint apartment, still wore sneakers with a hole in the toe. It made me feel grounded, safe, like the old me was still in there, quietly holding the steering wheel, while the new version, the one who casually bought Bitcoin at a gas station ATM, shouted directions from the passenger seat. Max, on the other hand, had embraced the transformation. He started going to networking events, real ones, swanky rooftop bars, minimalist co-working spaces, yacht meetups where everyone wore sunglasses at night and pretended to understand NFTs. He came back one night, buzzed on free champagne, and whispered, "I met a guy." That sentence never leads to anything good. His name's Leo. He runs a startup accelerator. Real money, Silicon Valley pedigree. I think he suspects I have cash. "Do you?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I might have mentioned an offshore family trust," he grinned. Max had always been the smooth talker between us, the kind of guy who could walk into a job interview unprepared and leave with a promotion. But this was different. Playing games with anonymous shell accounts was one thing. Getting involved with real-world millionaires? That was risk on a whole new level. Still, he was obsessed. For days he couldn't stop talking about Leo. The guy had launched 2 apps that sold for 7 figures each, consulted for hedge funds, and, according to Max, vibrated on a higher frequency. I told him to be careful, but Max had a plan. He wanted to legitimize the money, start a fake startup, seed it with our dirty funds, build something that looked like it had momentum, attract investors, and then either sell or pull out before anyone looked too closely. Basically, clean the money by dressing it up in a hoodie and calling it a tech company. It sounded insane, but also possible? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We set up a Delaware LLC called Ghost Fork, a name we came up with over Chinese takeout and a bottle of whiskey. Our product was a productivity app for remote teams. Max built a fake landing page in a weekend. I wrote a white paper filled with nonsense buzzwords like collaborative modularity and adaptive workspace integration. It sounded like a parody of a real startup. But that was the trick. In tech, everything sounds like parody if you squint hard enough. And then Leo came knocking. He loved it, said he could feel the vision, invited Max, and by extension, me, to pitch at a real investor roundtable downtown. The kind where venture capitalists in hoodies sip kombucha while moving millions around like Monopoly pieces. We panicked. Ghost Fork was barely a website. But Leo didn't care. "What matters is the story," he said. "People don't invest in ideas. They invest in momentum." That phrase stuck with me. And that's when it hit me. We weren't just laundering money anymore. We were accidentally building a company. 2 days before the investor roundtable, I sat in my room trying to rehearse the pitch. Problem was, there was nothing to pitch. Ghost Fork didn't exist, not really. No app, no users, no team. Just a sleek-looking website, a fake testimonial or 2, and a beta coming soon badge we slapped on the homepage to make it feel alive. Max didn't seem worried. "Dude," he said, pacing in front of our whiteboard covered in jargon, "the point isn't to be real, it's to look inevitable." He'd been reading startup founder memoirs like Scripture, Musk, Thiel, Jobs. Every quote that ever came out of a TED Talk was now fair game in our fake company gospel. Leo had even given us a template, a slide deck structure, 10 slides max that we were supposed to follow: market need, problem, solution, business model, roadmap, team. I made up most of it. Our team slide showed photos of people pulled from royalty-free image sites, complete with names like Elena T., former Dropbox DevOps lead, and Kishan M., scaled Slack infrastructure to 40 million DAUs. It was a joke, a performance. But when we sent the deck to Leo, he responded within 10 minutes. Can't wait for the room to see this. Don't change a thing. The pitch was set for Friday morning. We arrived at the 33rd floor of a WeWork-like incubator with floor-to-ceiling windows and kombucha on tap. I wore my only blazer. Max wore a black turtleneck and tried to channel Steve Jobs. Leo greeted us with the kind of hug you reserve for people you know are going to make you rich. The room was filled with about 15 people, investors, founders, a couple of board assistants tapping away on MacBooks. I was sweating through my shirt. Max, on the other hand, looked like he'd just walked into his natural habitat. He opened with a joke. They laughed. Then he said the words that sealed our fate. Remote collaboration is broken, and we're not fixing it. We're rebuilding it from scratch. That sentence landed like a TED Talk mic drop. I watched them nod. I watched them believe. We walked them through the fake app, talked about pain points, pretended to show a beta interface by clicking through mock-ups in a keynote slideshow. One guy, a serious-looking man with silver hair and an actual monocle, no joke, asked a question about our server architecture. Max answered like he'd written AWS himself. Then came the closing. We're currently raising a $500 million pre-seed at a $4 million valuation, Max said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Silence. Then Leo spoke. I'm in for $50,000. The floodgates opened. By the end of the session, we had soft commits for $310,000. I thought I was going to faint. We walked out of that building high on adrenaline, disbelief buzzing in our veins. You realize what this means? Max said as we stood by the elevator. Yeah, I replied, voice dry. We just convinced a room full of professionals to give real money to a company that doesn't exist. Max grinned, which means now we have to build it. I laughed, but it came out hollow, because somewhere deep inside, I knew he was right. We had crossed another line. We weren't just pretending anymore. We were going to have to become the thing we faked. By Monday morning, the money started hitting the new company account. We'd set up an actual business bank under Ghost Fork LLC, complete with a Stripe setup, a cap table, and legal docs that Leo's team graciously helped us draw up. They even introduced us to a startup lawyer named Christina, who wore denim jackets to meetings and used words like pre-traction leverage. She didn't ask too many questions. That made me nervous. Max, of course, was thriving. He leaned into the role with terrifying ease, started calling himself Chief Product Visionary. He even changed his LinkedIn profile to read, Rebuilding Remote Work from the Protocol Layer Up. We were living in a parody of Silicon Valley, and nobody seemed to notice. Meanwhile, I was panicking. We had $310,000 in the Ghost Fork account, real investor money, and nothing to show for it but a slick website and a bunch of mock-ups. These weren't anonymous offshore transfers anymore. These were wired funds from people who knew our names, had shaken our hands, had written us into their quarterly reports. We had to build something. So we hired people. That sentence still feels absurd to write, but we did. Max posted a job listing on AngelList looking for a part-time front-end developer and a UX/UI designer. Within a week, we had 5 interviews lined up. We ended up hiring a guy from Portugal named Tiago and a woman from Toronto named Steph. They were sharp, professional, way more qualified than we deserved. And they believed in the company. That was the scariest part. They thought Ghost Fork was real. They joined Slack, started pushing wireframes and interface mock-ups. Tiago built a basic prototype that actually did something, a shared note-taking panel with AI-assisted task splitting. It wasn't revolutionary, but it worked. More importantly, it gave us legitimacy. We even launched a private beta. A dozen startups signed up, just off Leo's referral. Founders started tweeting about us. Ghost Fork might be the next Notion. Watch this space. Tried Ghost Fork this week. Slick UX. Big potential. Max printed those tweets and taped them to our kitchen wall. I stopped sleeping. The money laundering, the lying, the fake team. It had all somehow evolved into a company, and not a joke company either. An actual product with real users being built by real people, all based on a crime that started with a misdirected email and a $20 test transfer. I started wondering, was this redemption or just a more socially acceptable scam? Then something happened that shook everything. Leo called and said, "Hey, I've got something wild for you guys. You free Thursday?" I thought maybe it was another pitch event. Max thought maybe we were getting featured in a blog or podcast. It wasn't either of those. Leo said, "I just had coffee with someone from Sequoia. They want to meet you." Silence. Sequoia. As in Sequoia Capital, the holy grail of venture funding. They love early-stage weirdos. You're weirdos. I told them Ghost Fork is doing something fundamental. They want to see the deck. I hung up, slowly. Then I looked at Max and said the one thing I hadn't let myself say out loud until that moment. We might actually make it. The meeting with Sequoia was set for Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. A video call, naturally. Leo said it was low stakes, but also casually mentioned that the partner we'd be speaking to had backed 3 unicorns in the last 6 years. Max celebrated by buying a $900 chair. I celebrated by developing stress hives. We spent the next 3 days polishing the pitch deck to a blinding shine. New screenshots, new roadmap, new marketing slides. Max insisted we include a section called Culture and Values, which he filled with phrases like async accountability and creative deep work. I rewrote our product vision 12 times. Each version sounded more profound and more meaningless than the last. By the time Thursday arrived, I was running on caffeine, cortisol, and sheer existential dread. The call began exactly on time. The Sequoia partner's name was Kieran. Clean-cut, early 40s, sharp eyes behind black glasses. He didn't smile much. Didn't say much. Just nodded as we walked through our deck, occasionally scribbling something on a yellow legal pad. Then came the questions. What's your monthly burn? What's your churn rate from private beta users? Who's your technical co-founder? That last one made my stomach drop. Max didn't miss a beat. That's me, he said, smiling. Built the MVP myself. We've since brought on Tiago to scale. A partial truth wrapped in a full lie. Kieran nodded again, unreadable. Interesting. And what's the source of your pre-seed capital? Personal funds? Max hesitated. A flicker. Half a second. And I jumped in. Combination, I said quickly. Some bootstrapping. Some family trust. And a convertible note through an angel network Leo introduced us to. Kieran gave a faint, unreadable smile. Good. Clean structure. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. When we finally closed the deck, Kieran said, "We'll be in touch. There's something here." The call ended. Max raised both fists in the air like we'd just won a championship. I felt like I needed a shower. The next day, Leo texted, "Kieran liked you. He's sending it up the chain. You guys are on fire." It should have felt like triumph. Instead, I felt like I was wearing a crown made of dynamite. Because now we weren't just playing startup, we were in their world. Real VCs, real due diligence, real lawyers who dig through your past like archaeologists with subpoenas, and we had secrets buried in every layer of our foundation. Max didn't see it that way. He thought we were finally safe. That money legitimized everything. But I couldn't forget where it all started. A stolen file, a test transfer, an operation built on digital fog. The more we succeeded, the more I felt like we were speeding down a mountain road in a car made of glass. That night, I got a message from Tiago. "Hey, just a heads up, that PDF you uploaded to the team folder, it has weird metadata. Created by HW_confidential_2023 and tagged Project Whisper. That intentional?" My blood turned to ice. I'd forgotten to scrub the original file name. Somewhere in our shared drive, the same drive accessed by our employees, was a ghost from the very beginning, a piece of the crime, a breadcrumb that could bring everything down. And worst of all, now someone else had seen it. I stared at Tiago's message for a long time before responding. Ah, good catch. That was an old template I reused. I'll clean it up and re-upload, thanks. It was the best I could do on short notice. Neutral, casual, not panicked, not guilty. I deleted the file within seconds, replaced it with a blank version renamed teamstructure_v2.pdf, and ran a metadata scrub on the entire shared drive just to be safe. But the damage was done. Tiago was no idiot. He'd seen enough, maybe not enough to piece it all together, but enough to sense something was off. I knew what would come next. Curiosity, quiet Googling, background checks, maybe a question to Steph like, "Hey, do you know where these guys came from?" And once one person started asking questions, it wouldn't stop there. I called Max. He didn't pick up. I texted him. "We have a problem. Metadata. Whisper. Tiago saw it." He responded 15 minutes later with just one word: handled. I called again. This time he answered, voice calm, almost bored. "Relax," he said. "I already talked to him, told him it was an inside joke from a previous startup we consulted for. Something about whispered knowledge flows." He laughed. "It's fine." "You sure?" "Positive." I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Max always had a talent for lying with confidence, but lately, it felt like that talent was evolving into something else, not lying to people, but becoming the lie itself. And as the stakes grew, I was starting to realize we were no longer equal partners in this thing. Max was ahead of me now, and I was struggling to keep up. The next week passed in a blur. Kieran circled back with a list of follow-up questions and a request for access to our internal GitHub repo. We scrambled to clean it up, removing old commit messages, creating fake forks, pushing new code just to look active. Tiago and Steph, bless them, kept working like nothing was wrong. They even scheduled a UX test session with 2 of our beta clients, both of whom gave glowing feedback. Meanwhile, the GhostFork Twitter account passed 3,000 followers. We got our first press mention in a mid-tier startup blog. 5 early-stage collaboration tools you should be watching in 2025. And then came the email. Subject line, Project Whisper, nobody, no signature, just a PDF attachment named uous.pdf. I opened it. It was a screenshot of one of the very first transfers we'd made. The $250 test withdrawal from an unmonitored shell account. It had our original dummy PayPal address, timestamp, IP log, nothing else, just that one page. I didn't need to ask who it was from. It wasn't the government. It wasn't some whistleblower. It was them. I stared at the email for hours, unable to move. My first instinct was to run. Not metaphorically, literally. Pack a bag, buy a bus ticket, disappear. Go full burner phones and cash in a backpack mode. Because whoever sent that PDF had access to things no one else should have. Logs, transaction details, IP addresses we'd buried behind VPNs and Tor routes. And they weren't asking, they were telling. You owe us. It wasn't a threat, it was a bill. Max, of course, didn't see it that way. "They're bluffing," he said as I showed him the file on my laptop. "Trying to scare us. If they had anything real, we'd already be in handcuffs or body bags." "I think this is real," I said. "They don't want to report us. They want to control us." Max leaned back in his new chair, the $900 one, and steepled his fingers like he was a Bond villain. "Then maybe we should pay them off." My stomach flipped. "With what? We don't even know who they are or what they want." He shrugged. "Then we find out. We're already deep, man. Might as well go deeper." I hated how calm he was. Like this was just another pitch, another investor to impress. But something had shifted in him. The Max I used to know, the nerd who mined Bitcoin in his underwear and laughed at Wall Street bros, he was gone. This version of Max wore black button-ups, quoted Naval Ravikant, and talked about leverage. But we agreed on one thing. We needed answers. So we replied to the email. Not from our real account. Max set up an encrypted burner on a private server and routed it through 3 layers of spoofed locations. The message was simple. Clarify the debt. We got a reply within an hour. $842,300. Interest started at 0.01% per hour. Clock is ticking. Attached was a full ledger of every transaction we'd ever pulled from their system. Not just mine, not just Max's. Everything, including one transfer I didn't recognize, a $30,000 movement Max had apparently done on his own, behind my back. I looked up at him. You said we stopped after the warning. He didn't deny it. I needed more runway, he said, to make Ghost Fork real. We were now in deep with a group powerful enough to trace us through anonymized systems, polite enough to invoice us with precision, and patient enough to wait for us to build something valuable before knocking. They didn't want to punish us. They wanted a return on investment. And worst of all, they had leverage. Because if they went public with this, Ghost Fork was over. The VC money would vanish. Our employees would leave. The startup world, built entirely on image and trust, would tear us apart. They want to own a piece, I said aloud. Exactly, Max said, which means we give them one. What are you talking about? He looked me dead in the eyes. We fold them into the cap table. You want to give shadow criminals equity in our company? He didn't blink. They already own it. This is just paperwork. It was the most insane thing I'd ever heard. And yet, the longer I thought about it, the more it made sense. Because if we didn't give them a seat at the table, they'd burn the whole thing down. There's a moment in every scam, every lie, every illusion, when it becomes real, not because it was true, but because too many people now depend on it staying alive. That was Ghost Fork. Our investors, our employees, our beta users, they weren't in on the lie, and that made the lie bigger than us. It had momentum now, it had gravity, and we were stuck in orbit around a secret we couldn't shake off. Max's idea, to give them a piece of the company, wasn't just desperate. It was genius. Evil genius, sure, but genius all the same. We can't just add mysterious criminal entity to the cap table, I argued. We don't, Max said. We give them a shell, just like they gave us. He walked me through it like it was any other strategy session. We'd create a new holding company, an anonymous fund, Delaware registered, with a clean paper trail. Ghost Fork would issue them advisory shares in exchange for early risk capital, a perfectly legal maneuver in startup land. On paper, it would look like a late investor got in quietly and opted to stay silent. They'd never appear in public, no meetings, no signatures, just dividends. It was blackmail disguised as equity, and we were calling it a business deal. Won't our existing investors notice? I asked. They'll assume it's a family office. Happens all the time. No one questions money that shows up quietly. It felt wrong, because it was wrong. But at that point, it was either do this or lose everything. So we did it. We created Iron Hill Growth Partners, a fake investment firm with a borrowed office address in Zurich and a real legal filing that cost us $900 in lawyer fees. We allocated them 6% of Ghost Fork as non-voting advisory equity, buried in a clause under Strategic Early Partners. Max sent them the paperwork through the encrypted channel. They didn't respond, but the emails stopped. That was their version of a thank you. For a while, everything went back to normal. Our Sequoia pitch advanced to final review. Kieran looped in 2 partners for a second meeting. We hired a back-end dev from Berlin. Tech blogs started calling us the future of hybrid collaboration. Max was even invited to speak at a startup panel titled Founders to Watch. I stood on the edge of it all, watching the company we faked rise like a balloon we couldn't hold anymore. And that's when I noticed the second betrayal. Max had quietly given himself an extra 3% founder equity after our last cap table update. I only caught it because Tiago, bless his meticulous heart, was double-checking our share allocations before sending out an updated investor report. I confronted Max immediately. He didn't deny it. I've been running this company, he said calmly. You've been running from it. It hit like a gut punch.
He wasn't just protecting the lie anymore. He was owning it, reshaping it in his image, and slowly, methodically pushing me out of the center. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the latest Ghost Fork dashboard metrics. Over 4,000 users in private beta, 92% retention, growth curve trending up. We'd built something real on top of something stolen. And now the monster had a new master. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the blank laptop screen, asking myself a single question over and over. Is this who I am now? The money said yes, the company said yes, Max's silent betrayal said yes. But somewhere a quieter voice was whispering. The same voice that once made me hesitate before sending that first $20 transfer. The one that used to keep me awake with guilt. The one I had silenced for too long. I opened our internal documents and started digging. I read every clause in the shareholder agreements, every line in the safe notes, every advisory allocation. I traced the Iron Hill Shell's paper trail and how Max had funneled their equity grant through a second layer holding account tied to his name. Not mine, not ours, his. It wasn't just about survival anymore. Max was setting himself up to be the only survivor. The next day I called Leo and asked to meet, alone. We sat on a bench in Millennium Park, pretending to enjoy overpriced coffees while a jazz trio played off in the distance. It felt surreal, calm, civilized. I told him part of the truth. I said I'd discovered some early transactions we didn't properly disclose, that Max had moved funds before Ghost Fork was even formed, and that some of our advisory equity might be compromised. I made it sound technical, unintentional, something that could be fixed but only with help. Leo listened, quiet as ever. Then he said, "You're trying to cut your co-founder out." "No," I said. "I'm trying to cut out the rot." He leaned back. "Rot that raised us 300 grand? Rot that's now laundering money through a fake investment firm," I said, letting the words hang. I didn't expect him to flinch. He didn't. He just sipped his coffee, eyes on the skyline. Then he said something I didn't see coming. "You're not the first founder I've helped clean up after." I blinked. Leo smiled, tight-lipped. "Startups are messy. People cut corners, lie, cheat, innovate a little too hard. You think all those unicorns got there by playing nice with the IRS? I back builders, and sometimes builders need cover." I didn't know what shocked me more, that he knew or that he didn't care. "So what now?" I asked. He shrugged. "Depends. You want to be a martyr or a millionaire?" I didn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. Later that night, I returned to the apartment and found Max on the balcony, whiskey in one hand, phone in the other. He was FaceTiming with someone, laughing, bragging, being the version of himself that always wins. When he saw me, he ended the call and raised his glass. "To survival," he said. I didn't toast back. Instead, I said, "I know what you did with the equity. I know about Iron Hill's second account." He paused, only for a second, but I saw it. Then he smiled. "You going to turn me in?" he asked, not sounding worried. "I might," I said. He stepped closer. "You won't, because without me, all of this crumbles. You think Leo backs you alone? You think Sequoia signs a check for a guy who still flinches at strategic ambiguity? Be serious. He wasn't just daring me. He was right. Ghost Fork was now a machine, sleek, fast, and entirely out of my control. And the worst part? I had helped build it. I spent the next 3 days in silence. Not literal silence. People still pinged me on Slack. I still smiled through Zoom calls. I still responded to emails from advisors and beta testers. But internally, total stillness, a kind of emotional lockdown. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was calculation. Max was right about one thing. Without him, I didn't stand a chance. Not in the boardroom, not with Leo, not with Sequoia. He'd become the voice, the face, the myth. I was the ghost in Ghost Fork, the guy who never gave a keynote, the guy who didn't have a verified Twitter account, the guy who knew too much and said too little. But I still had one thing: the truth. I compiled a file, not to send, not yet, just to have. A war chest of receipts, early transaction logs, metadata screenshots, timelines, the original Project Whisper PDF, a breakdown of Iron Hill's secondary equity funnel, and even the cap table edits Max had made without board approval. It was enough to sink him. Enough to sink me too. But maybe, just maybe, enough to burn down Ghost Fork while preserving myself. I kept the file in a secure, encrypted folder, uploaded to a cloud server under a dead friend's email account. One click could send it to every investor, lawyer, and journalist in our circle. It was my detonator. Then came the email that pushed me to the edge. Subject line, board update, founder equity restructure proposal. Max had drafted a motion to dilute my shares by 40%, citing contribution imbalance and operational redundancy. The legalese was elegant, ruthless. He wasn't just pushing me out of the company, he was erasing me. I stared at it for a long time, hands clenched, heart thudding. Then I got up, grabbed my jacket, and walked. I didn't know where I was going, just out, into the noise and light of the city, where I could think like a person again instead of a cornered animal. At some point, I ended up outside a co-working space I used to daydream about joining back when I was broke. I watched the startup kids inside, tapping laptops, laughing over coffee, whiteboarding big dreams that might change nothing at all. They didn't know me. They didn't know Ghost Fork. They didn't know what it cost to build the thing they were aspiring toward. And I wondered, if I destroyed it, would that be justice or just revenge? That night, I opened the detonator file again, hovered over the send button. My finger trembled. Then, for the first time in months, I asked myself a question I had buried beneath ambition, fear, and profit. What do I actually want? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew this: I couldn't stay silent forever. I didn't press send. Not yet. I closed the file, shut my laptop, and sat in the dark until the sun came up. Not thinking, not planning, just waiting. Because deep down I knew, once I lit that fuse, there was no turning back. I would either blow up Ghost Fork and Max, or blow up myself trying. The next day, Max called an all-hands meeting, said it was time to unveil the next phase of Ghost Fork. His voice had that edge, the over-rehearsed calm of someone preparing to outmaneuver a threat, me. He'd invited Leo to the call, Kieran from Sequoia too, a few other angel investors. He was staging it like a product update, but I knew better. This was a performance. I joined the Zoom late, intentionally. My video was off, my mic muted. I watched him grin through his pitch about Ghost Fork teams, an enterprise tier pivot with a sleek UI demo, and a roadmap that suspiciously mirrored a startup we'd both trashed 6 months ago. He was repackaging the same platform with bigger promises and hoping no one noticed the seams. They didn't. Kieran nodded. Leo smiled like he'd already counted the Series A, and then Max did it. I also want to take a moment to recognize that as Ghost Fork evolves, so too does its leadership. While I've been steering product, Alex has taken a much-needed step back from day-to-day ops, so we're proposing a shift in structure that better reflects our current execution dynamics. He was doing it live, publicly, on a recorded investor call. I should have spoken up right then, but I didn't, because in that moment, I had an idea. Not revenge, not exposure, not destruction. Something worse. A win. After the meeting, I messaged Kieran privately, asked if we could talk. Just 10 minutes. No agenda. She agreed, probably out of curiosity more than anything. We jumped on a call that afternoon, and I did what Max never expected. I told the truth. Not all of it, just enough. I said that Max had been pushing for equity restructuring without my agreement, that he'd sidelined me despite equal founding roles, that some of our early advisory grants were legally gray and could become problematic during diligence. I framed it carefully, no accusations, no threats, just concern. Kieran listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Can you document all of that?" "I already have." Silence. Then, "Send me what you're comfortable sharing. I'll have our legal team take a look." I sent her a sanitized version of the detonator file, clean enough to avoid legal exposure for myself. dirty enough to raise eyebrows. It was a risk. She could have forwarded it to Max, but she didn't. 3 days later, Leo called me. No pleasantries, just, "We need to talk about Max." My heart didn't pound, my hands didn't shake, because I'd lit the fuse, and now I was waiting for the boom. Leo didn't yell. That made it worse. He was cold, controlled, professional. The voice of a man who's cleaned up 1,000 messes and doesn't blink anymore when someone bleeds all over his shoes. "We went through your materials," he said. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I was pacing my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, heart a slow-burning drum. "There's enough here to trigger a review. Potential compliance issues, conflicts of interest, misallocation of advisory shares." He paused. Max didn't disclose any of it. Of course he didn't. I stayed quiet. Leo continued. "This could tank the raise, but you already knew that." I let that hang. Then I asked, "What happens now?" He sighed, not dramatically, just like someone who's tired of choosing between bad options. "I'll talk to Kieran, but if this goes public, nobody wins. You'll both be radioactive." I swallowed. "Unless," he added, "one of you steps aside quietly." Ah, there it was. The offer. The deal. I could walk away. Maybe even keep my vesting. Let Max spin some PR story about creative differences or health or whatever excuse founders use when the walls start cracking. But I didn't respond right away, because I had one more card to play. "I don't want to leave," I said, "but I want Max out." Silence. Then finally, a laugh. Dry, sharp, almost admiring. "You're serious." I built the back end. I designed the data architecture. Max didn't even touch code after month 2. He stole shares. He fabricated the Iron Hill angle, and he tried to push me out of my own company. If we let that stand, what does that say to everyone else? Leo didn't answer. I continued. "You back builders, right? You said so yourself." Another pause. Then, "Let me talk to the board." We hung up, and I sat there, stunned. Because for the first time since this entire ride began, I had said no to power, and it had actually listened. The next 72 hours were a blur. Max went silent. His Slack activity flatlined. Rumors started bouncing in private founder chats. Something about co-founder tensions and equity disputes. One VC DM'd me asking if GhostFork was imploding. I told him we were restructuring, which wasn't a lie. Then came the meeting. Leo, Kieran, a board observer, me, no Max. Leo opened. "We've reached a resolution." My stomach twisted. Kieran and I spoke. "The board is concerned about Max's omissions. We've also reviewed your contributions, Alex, and we agree the company's technical core would be compromised without you." I didn't breathe. "We're asking Max to step down as CEO, effective immediately." The words didn't land right away. The Slack message went out at 4 p.m. sharp. "Team, after thoughtful discussion with the board, Max will be stepping down as CEO of GhostFork effective today. I'll be assuming the role going forward. I know this is a lot to process. Let's keep communication respectful, focused, and forward-looking. More soon, Alex." I hovered over the send button for a full minute before clicking it, and then it was done. In one keystroke, I took the throne. The reactions were instant and chaotic. Shock, confusion, guarded congrats. I got DMs from engineers who had no idea there was a power struggle. A product manager asked if this was a hack. One of our interns replied with nothing but a crying emoji. "And what happened to Max?" What happened to Max? He disappeared. Not literally. He posted a vague, on to the next adventure tweet the next morning, packed up his stuff that weekend, and left the office without a single word to me. Not that I blamed him. He'd been outmaneuvered, outlawyered, outgunned, and I was now sitting in the seat he'd spent 2 years polishing for himself.
But victory didn't taste like I expected. It tasted like burnt coffee and unreadable spreadsheets and backlogged JIRA tickets. Because once the coup ends, the war becomes maintenance. You win a company, and then you have to actually run it. The meetings doubled. The expectations tripled. People looked at me differently, not with admiration, not even with skepticism, but with anticipation, like I now owed them something I hadn't yet earned. And the weight of it settled fast. One week in, I was at my desk at 11:30 p.m., surrounded by half-empty seltzer cans and a whiteboard full of feature dependencies, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. Was this the dream? The money hadn't even hit yet. We were still negotiating the Series A terms. My equity was now safer, more valuable, but I wouldn't see a cent for months, maybe longer. And yet, something had shifted. For the first time, I felt seen. Not just as a tech guy, not as the other co-founder, but as the guy, the one with the final say, the one who didn't walk away. Still, I kept the detonator file, just in case. Not out of paranoia, but as a reminder that power is fragile, that people forget easily, that the moment you stop building, they start looking for someone else who will. I brought in new advisors, rebuilt the roadmap, hired a VP of product who actually listened. We scrapped Ghost Fork teams and doubled down on our original vision. Clean, contextual collaboration for devs and researchers. No fluff. And 2 months later, Kieran called with the news. Term sheets in. $12 million, $48 million post. You're a paper millionaire, Alex. I didn't jump up. I didn't cheer. I just let the silence sit. Then I whispered, "Huh." She laughed. "That's it? Just huh?" I guess I thought it would feel bigger. "Give it time," she said, "or spend some of it." That night I ordered a pizza from the same place I used to split with Max when we were broke and barely getting by. I ate it alone, on the floor of my living room. No fireworks, no champagne, just quiet. Because sometimes becoming a millionaire doesn't feel like a revolution. It feels like a deep breath after barely surviving the climb. You'd think the money changes everything. It doesn't. At least, not in the ways you expect. Sure, I upgraded apartments, got a place with a second bedroom I never used, bought a Herman Miller chair so my back wouldn't feel like drywall after 12 hours of meetings, subscribed to 3 different productivity apps I barely opened. But most days still felt like grinding gears. The difference was that now I was grinding them alone. The investor calls came more frequently, less about excitement, more about numbers, growth metrics, retention rates, month-over-month burn. The product team ballooned. We went from 7 engineers to 22 in under 6 weeks. Some of them were incredible. Some of them weren't, but all of them looked to me for answers I didn't always have. The irony hit me sometime around Q2. I had more control than ever, and I'd never felt more replaceable. Because money doesn't make you irreplaceable. Execution does. Vision does. And those are easy to lose when your calendar is just one Zoom meeting after another with people who say OKRs like a prayer. I tried to stay grounded. I kept my GitHub active, still pushed code sometimes, still joined the stand-ups. But the vibe had shifted. I was no longer Alex who built the back end. I was Alex, the CEO. A role, a title, a figurehead, if I let myself become one. Meanwhile, Max reappeared. Not at Ghost Fork, but on TechCrunch. He launched a new AI startup, raised $4 million pre-seed in 2 weeks. Same investors who'd ghosted us before. His LinkedIn tagline, "Building smarter tools for smarter people." I stared at it for 10 minutes. Smarter people. Cute. I didn't reach out. Neither did he. Because we both knew the game now. Once you step into the big leagues, everything becomes narrative. Reputation, leverage,
No one wants to admit the iceberg they just barely missed. But I couldn't stop watching. His company got traction, press, hype. For a moment, I felt that old itch, the one that whispered, maybe he was the visionary all along. But then I looked at our numbers. Ghost Fork was growing, not explosively, but steadily. Our churn was low, our team was cohesive, engineers actually liked using our tools and told other engineers. Real users, real value. We weren't a rocket ship. We weren't at information. We were about a train, loud, unsexy, but we were getting somewhere. And me, I started to sleep again. Not always well, but better. There was something comforting about knowing where your pressure points are. I didn't fear Max anymore. I didn't dread the board meetings. I didn't flinch when people disagreed with me in Slack. I wasn't pretending to be a leader anymore. I just was one. Not perfect, not always confident, but real. And maybe that was enough. There's a strange thing that happens when you get what you always said you wanted. You start forgetting why you wanted it in the first place. I caught myself one night, staring at a financial dashboard, not because anything was wrong. We were fine. Revenue trending up, runway secure, user metrics steady. But I wasn't looking at the numbers. I was looking through them, like they were supposed to reflect something else, something deeper, a mirror maybe. Instead, all I saw was the creeping realization that I didn't recognize the person sitting in this expensive ergonomic chair, wearing a hoodie that cost more than my rent used to be. Somewhere along the way, accidental millionaire became just millionaire. I'd stopped writing code months ago. I hadn't touched a personal project since Ghost Fork passed 10,000 MAUs. I gave talks now, at conferences, on panels, founders in conversation, the art of the pivot, how to build what people love. People clapped, they nodded, they asked for my advice after, and I smiled. I gave the polished answers, the good ones, the kinds that sound like wisdom, but are really just well-rehearsed stories with the mess cleaned out. But deep down, I missed being confused. I missed not knowing what I was doing, and learning anyway. There was a purity to it, when it was just me and a problem and no expectations. No VCs, no headcount plans, no anonymous Glassdoor reviews, just building. Now every decision felt like it was being watched. Every delay came with an investor check-in. Every feature launch came with internal drama and external chatter. Sometimes I'd get messages from college friends. Dude, you're crushing it. You made it. You're living the dream. And I'd think, am I? Because here's the secret they don't tell you in all those hustle culture TED Talks and Medium posts with emojis in the title. Making it doesn't mean feeling like you've made it. You carry the same brain, the same insecurities, the same late-night thoughts that maybe you just got lucky, or maybe you tricked everyone, or maybe next year it'll all come crashing down and they'll finally see you for what you are, a guy who wrote a decent data pipeline and rode a broken rocket to the top. I talked to Kieran about it once. We were at some industry dinner, sitting at the far end of the table while some 24-year-old fintech founder talked about vertical disruption like he'd invented bread. Kieran leaned over and asked quietly, "You happy?" I blinked. She said, "Don't give me the board-approved version, just yes or no." I paused. Then I said, "I don't know." She nodded like she understood. "Good," she said. "That means you're still asking the right questions." And for the first time in months, I exhaled. It came in at 3:42 a.m. Not a Slack ping, not a notification from one of our endless apps, just a simple email. Subject: Hey, from Max. No punctuation, no attachments, just 6 words in the body. You ever wonder if it was worth it? I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to answer, but because I wasn't sure if I should answer. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not directly. Sure, I'd seen the interviews. He was still doing the rounds, a smaller startup now, leaner, meaner, talking about human-AI synergy like it was a religion. But beneath the buzzwords, I could see it, the same tired look I saw in the mirror. Was he fishing for closure, regret, A fight? I left it unread for 3 days. And then, on a quiet Sunday morning, with cold coffee and nothing on the calendar, I replied, "Sometimes, usually when it's quiet, but I think we made something good, and I hope you are too. Alex." No sign-off, no flourish, just truth. He never responded, but a week later I saw a tweet from him. "Building is hard, letting go is harder." No likes, no retweets, just hanging there in the void like a message in a bottle. I didn't reply, didn't like it, just closed the app and went outside. I hadn't done that much lately, gone outside without an agenda. I walked to a park I used to sit in when we were planning Ghost Fork in the early days. The same old bench was there, same view of the pond, same distant sound of traffic. I sat down. There was a kid nearby trying to fly a drone, and failing miserably. It kept drifting sideways, buzzing like an angry insect, crashing into a bush, getting yanked out by a string. But he kept trying, over and over. At one point the drone rose about 10 feet, wobbled, then hovered, just for a second, perfectly level in the air. He looked up at it with wide eyes. Then it crashed, but he smiled anyway. And I thought, that's it. That's the feeling we all chase. Not the $1 million, not the exit, not the TechCrunch write-up or the Series A or the champagne on the rooftop nonsense. It's that hovering moment, the second when something broken finally flies. Even briefly, even if nobody else sees it. We built something that worked. Maybe it crashed after. Maybe it wasn't perfect. But it hovered. For a moment, Ghost Fork hovered, and I was there to see it. That's worth something. Maybe not what I expected, but something real. I'm writing this now from a tiny cabin about 2 hours outside the city. No Wi-Fi, no whiteboards, no push notifications. Just me, some coffee, and the sound of pine trees creaking slightly in the wind like they're thinking. It's been almost 2 years since I stepped down as CEO of Ghost Fork. We didn't IPO, we didn't flame out, we didn't sell for billions or pennies, we just settled, stabilized. The company kept going, with Kieran eventually taking the reins. She was better at it than I ever was, honestly. Steadier, less romantic, more strategic. I stayed on the board for a while, then gradually drifted back into the shadows. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally understood something I never had time to sit with. I'm a builder, not a manager. I don't like maintaining empires. I like making weird little engines that do something unexpected. I like solving puzzles nobody else notices. I like asking what if, and then trying to code an answer, even if it's clunky and useless to anyone but me. The money's still there. That part's surreal. I log into a private banking app once a month and stare at numbers that no longer feel connected to my life. It's like checking the weather on Mars, interesting but not urgent. I gave some away, helped my parents pay off their house, donated to a few open source projects I loved, supported an indie dev I'd followed for years. I still rent, still eat cheap Thai food, still write code at midnight with lo-fi beats in the background. People think money makes you someone else. It doesn't. It just gives you a mirror with better lighting, and what you see, well, that's always been there. I didn't set out to be a millionaire. Hell, I didn't even set out to be a founder. I just wanted to fix a thing that annoyed me, and then one step led to another. And then suddenly, I was on a rocket I hadn't realized I was building. But looking back, I wouldn't change much. The mistakes, they taught me. The arguments, they sharpened me. The success, it was a side effect, not the goal. Max and I haven't talked since that last email. Maybe we never will. Maybe that's okay. We were a moment in each other's stories, not the whole plot. And the plot now? It's quieter, slower, but still mine. I've got a terminal window open and an idea for a tool that automatically organizes messy file systems using GPT and regular expressions. It's probably not monetizable. It'll probably break 100 times. But it's mine, and I'll build it, because that's what I do. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes me rich. Not the money, not the shares, not the exit, just the freedom to chase strange ideas, and the peace to do it without needing them to make me anyone else. The accidental millionaire? Yeah, that's still true. But here's the part nobody writes about. Sometimes the real wealth is learning who you are when the noise fades, and learning to like that person,
even when no one's watching.